August 1914. A wave of fervent patriotism swept across Europe, deafening the voices of dissent. Millions of young men enthusiastically marched to recruitment offices, eager for a glorious, short war. In Berlin, crowds cheered Kaiser Wilhelm II, who famously declared, "You will be home before the leaves have fallen from the trees." Train stations became tearful farewells and joyous send-offs alike. Similar scenes unfolded in Paris, London, and Vienna. The illusion of a quick, decisive conflict was pervasive. This act shocked the world and immediately drew Great Britain into the conflict. Britain had pledged to protect Belgium's neutrality. Its strategic blueprint, the Schlieffen Plan, dictated a swift knockout blow against France. This audacious plan bypassed the heavily fortified Franco-German border. Mobilization orders crackled across telegraph wires. Reservists left their fields and factories, donning uniforms in a rapid, unprecedented logistical effort. The German war machine, honed for decades, sprang into action with chilling efficiency. Their tenacious defense, though ultimately futile, significantly delayed the German timetable. Belgian forts held out longer than anticipated. Massed infantry assaults against modern machine guns and artillery were suicidal. The brutal reality of modern warfare began to emerge. Instead, German armies poured into neutral Belgium on August 4th, violating international treaties. German commanders, however, began to deviate from the original blueprint. They pulled troops to counter French incursions or to reinforce their eastern front against Russia. Belgium, a small nation, bravely resisted the overwhelming German advance. The meticulously planned advance was losing its decisive edge. Friction and fatigue also began to set in among the rapidly advancing German troops. Paris seemed within grasp, creating panic in the French capital. The French government even evacuated to Bordeaux. German reprisals for perceived resistance led to widespread atrocities and destruction. They clashed with the Germans at Mons, holding their ground against superior numbers before being forced to retreat. This marked Britain's first major engagement. It was a desperate, sprawling engagement fought along a 100-mile front northeast of Paris. The very existence of France hung in the balance. This was a direct, head-on assault driven by a fervent desire for revenge for the 1870 defeat. It proved disastrous. Troops were famously rushed to the front lines from Paris using hundreds of commandeered taxicabs. This desperate measure became an iconic symbol of French resolve. This penetration threatened to encircle the entire German right wing. The German advance, previously unstoppable, ground to a halt. Miles were covered daily, but exhaustion and demoralization mounted. The battle was a chaotic, fluid struggle, a stark contrast to the static lines that would soon define the front. This unexpected resistance forced German divisions to commit more resources and precious time. Belgian civilian populations also suffered terribly. Each army tried to get around the other's northern flank. This period became known as the Race to the Sea. This 400-mile-long scar on the European landscape would define the war for the next 4 years. It saved Paris, preserved the French Republic, and shattered Germany's hope of a quick war. The initial phase of mobile warfare was over. This continuous process led to a vast, unbroken line of fortifications. The Western Front was forming. They were about inches of land, often gained at unimaginable cost. The era of static trench warfare had arrived. The romantic notions of cavalry charges and decisive battles were replaced by the grim mechanics of attrition. The world was utterly unprepared for what it had unleashed: rats, lice, and the psychological strain of constant bombardment became daily companions. The shovel became as important as the rifle. Soldiers burrowed into the earth for protection from the relentless artillery fire. This dangerous vulnerability was a result of Kluck's deviation and poor communication between German commands. It was a fatal flaw. It painted Germany as a brutal aggressor, further cementing Allied resolve. The initial optimism began to sour for some. Soldiers quickly learned the brutal reality. This was not a glorious adventure, but a horrific struggle for survival. Instead of sweeping west of Paris, as per the original plan, Kluck wheeled southeast. He aimed to trap the retreating French Fifth Army. He tirelessly worked to reorganize and reposition his shattered armies. Joffre believed a counterattack was still possible. General Gallieni, the military governor of Paris, quickly spotted this vulnerability. The opportunity for a decisive counterstroke presented itself. News of these Rape of Belgium atrocities spread quickly, fueling Allied propaganda and galvanizing public opinion. This was a tactical necessity to halt the Allied pursuit. Direct frontal assaults proved suicidal against entrenched machine guns. Meanwhile, French forces launched their own offensive, the Plan 17, into Alsace-Lorraine. The French, relying on outdated tactics and bright uniforms, suffered horrendous casualties. The Schlieffen Plan's success hinged on speed and a wide sweep through Belgium. This thinning of the right flank, the crucial hammer of the Schlieffen Plan, would have dire consequences. By late August, the German right wing was pushing deep into northern France. The British Expeditionary Force, small but professional, entered the fray. The BEF joined the general Allied retreat, a desperate, grueling withdrawal under constant German pressure. Despite their exhaustion, Allied commanders, particularly French General Joseph Joffre, remained resolute. The German First Army, commanded by General Alexander von Kluck, made a critical error. This maneuver exposed Kluck's right flank to the newly formed French Sixth Army. The French Sixth Army launched its attack against von Kluck's exposed flank. For several days, intense fighting raged. Both sides were exhausted, battered, and at the limits of their endurance. A critical gap, some 30 miles wide, opened between the German First and Second Armies. British and French forces, spotting this chasm, bravely pushed into the breach. On September 9th, German Chief of Staff Helmuth von Moltke, thousands of miles away and receiving conflicting reports, lost his nerve. The German armies pulled back to the Aisne River, some 40 miles north. The Battle of the Marne was a strategic Allied victory of immense proportions. The retreating German armies dug in along the Aisne River. They quickly constructed rudimentary trenches and defensive positions. The Allies, exhausted but emboldened, pursued them. However, they soon realized the strength of these new defensive lines. Both sides then began a desperate outflanking maneuver, racing northwards towards the English Channel. As one side attempted to outflank, the other would extend its own lines, digging new trenches. From the Belgian coast to the Swiss frontier, A complex network of trenches, barbed wire, and machine gun nests emerged. The initial dynamic battles had given way to a terrifying stalemate. No longer were battles about grand maneuver and sweeping advances. The optimism of August 1914 lay shattered in the mud and blood of the Western Front. Life in the trenches was a constant torment of cold, damp disease and the pervasive smell of death. The Great War had just begun, but it had already redefined combat.